Hey everyone, MiRai here with a quick hardware upgrade video. I felt it was necessary because if you watch the old video, at this point it's now old because I'm upgrading. So that's old, outdated information. Here's the updated information. That's right, this is my case and there's nothing in here. Nothing in here, no motherboard, no nothing at the moment. We'll go over that later in the video. So in the last video, I talked about how I had to sell my kidney in order to afford all of that hardware. Well, this time doctors wouldn't let me take out my other kidney. They said I kind of needed it. So I went ahead and I wrote Santa a letter, and because me and him are bros, he went ahead and he delivered. In fact, he delivered early because it's not even Christmas yet and I've got all this cool stuff to go over. So at the top of the pile, we have a GTX. Hello? GTX 780 Ti. Not just one, but two. Hold on. Three GTX 780 Ti's. Actually, I'm lying. See, what you don't see is I take it and I put it to the right, and then I do this, and you don't see my hand in it. There's another one. Hey! Just kidding. Just kidding. There's only three. There's only three. So anyway, one of these bad boys, if you remember the old video, I had three GTX 580 3GB GPUs in there, in the case. And one of these bad boys is as powerful as all three of those cards. So essentially I have about 9 or 10 of those 580s in my case. I've already tested these out, and they're phenomenal. They are phenomenal. They are incredibly sexy, incredibly sexy. So I can't wait to get some more game time in on them, to say the least. I guess I'll go over this. Not that this is important. These backplates, these are backplates that go on the back of the GPUs. Actually, the GPU's over there, and I'm not going to get up and show you guys. They're really just for aesthetics. They're just for aesthetics, and what they kind of do is they go on the back of the card. A backplate goes on the back of the card, and it kind of just protects the open side because the card is open. You can just like touch this. You can just touch all the components and stuff on one side, all the solder points and everything. This protects that. And some people will argue until they're blue in the face that this is going to drop your temperature. It might drop your temperature 1 or 2 degrees, but it's really nothing to get crazy about, okay? So don't let anyone talk you into one of these backplates because they're like, oh, it's going to drop your temps. When in reality, it's like 1 or 2 degrees, and that's it. That's all you're really looking at. Not a big deal. I buy them for the aesthetics and the fact that they protect the back side of my card. But don't tell anyone. I've got the, hopefully you can see that with the film still on there. They're just regular GTX 780 backplates. I'm moving it around because I'm hoping you guys can see that. Yeah, the TI backplates were out of stock, so these are the exact same thing. They just don't have a TI written at the end of it, which I could just scratch in there with a screwdriver if I really wanted to. Keep that there. Not a big deal. Just for aesthetics, just for protection. It's always good to have protection. Next on the list, do not judge me for purchasing this, okay? Do not judge me. But it's, it's a PCI Express SSD. It's two 120 gigabyte SSDs in RAID 0. There's really not much I can say about this at the moment. I didn't get a whole lot of time to play with this. It's a little bit faster than a single SSD on a SATA 3 port. That's all I can say at the moment. This frees up a SATA port, so it's two less cables, which is kind of good because actually all the SSDs in here right now, they're pretty crammed. The cabling is pretty crammed back there, and I actually don't think, even though I have space for another SSD here and I have the available ports on the motherboard, I don't think I could fit any more cables back there. So this kind of comes in handy, and we're going to do some more testing with this. Probably really not necessary for most people to have this, but I just really always wanted to try one, and I don't like OCZ. OCZ used to make these. They obviously just went bankrupt, and I think it was Toshiba that bought them for an incredibly low amount of money. And Asus, I guess you can't go wrong. Even though they use the same SandForce controller, I think I'm hoping at this point SandForce firmware is mature enough that I'm not going to have any trouble with this. We're hoping. What else? Last but not least. God, this thing is a big box. The Asus Rampage 4 Black Edition motherboard. And I'm really not too worried about the Assassin's Creed. That I could care less about. But I cannot wait. I gave a quick glance just to make sure that it wasn't smashed when it came in the mail. So everything looks to be intact. But I cannot wait to put this thing in. I cannot wait to pull this out, look at it, give you a close-up on the camera. It's going to be phenomenal. It's going to be a lot of fun. You might ask, what happened with the EVGA X79 Dark that I had before? I kept talking about how delicious it looked. Well, I also said in the prior video that I was hoping EVGA had worked out all of their bugs in their motherboards. No, I'm sorry. I took a chance. I've used Asus forever, and I think a lot of people just kind of find a brand and you stick with it. But the Black Edition wasn't out yet. If the Black Edition was out at the same time as the Dark was, I would have gone with the Black Edition. I would have, honestly. But the Dark was out. I had the CPU, I had the memory, I had everything ready to go, and I just needed a motherboard, and I was like, let's do this. I jumped on the Dark. I was like, this looks cool. It looks cool. It's a cool looking board, but it just I don't know. I think it could have been so much more. I think it still has a bunch of bugs in the BIOS and all that. They're still working on it, but I'm tired of sitting around and waiting. So hopefully Asus. This is actually a very special board. This is a very special motherboard. This is an incredibly heavy box. And if you can see the light, yeah, it's like shiny. It's like the whole thing is shiny though. This is the cardboard on this box is like heavy duty cardboard. You know, I guess that's what you're paying for. You're really just paying for a really heavy duty box. But this is the only motherboard that Asus made at this point in time. They put all of their effort into this one board, all kinds of different layouts that they tried before they figured out what they liked or what they thought would be best. And hopefully this doesn't let me down, because that would suck. Either way, I would just stick with it even if it did suck, because I am not going to pull out another motherboard. I was really not looking forward to pulling out the motherboard that was in here. Took me forever to get it out of there, even just a little bit, and now I have to swap out all the components. Not looking forward to it, but in the end, well, I hope in the end that it's all going to be worth it. This stuff over here, the GPUs and the SSD, are good to go. This motherboard, hopefully it's good to go too. And I guess one final thing. So I bought some more Gelid GC Extreme. If you watched the first video, I had I had a shitty time trying to spread that stuff. And apparently, from what I understand, I talked to someone who used it. Then I watched YouTube videos, and I watched people spread it on there. And I also read reviews. No one ever talked about anything that I had seen. If you watch the other video, it seemed like I had just garbage paste. Just like the paste was just worn out or something. Something was up with it. It just would not stick to the surface of the CPU. It did not want to leave. It did not want to leave the applicator or the credit card that I was trying to spread it with. It was just so difficult to work with. I gave it another chance. We're going to try it again. Hopefully Gelid comes through. If they do not, they are going to hear from me, because this is bullshit if this is two tubes that suck. So, all right, folks, let's get this show on the road. Let's do this. Let's do this. It's time to do this. Let's go. Now, because I knew that this might end up being a long and arduous night of swapping out hardware, I had to pick up a pizza. This bad boy right here comes with pepperoni, sausage, bacon, black olives, mushrooms, green peppers, and onions. I mean, look at me pointing right at it. That must mean that it's good. I'm even going to give you a close-up of it.
Doesn't that look so good? That looks delicious. All right, so I first had to pull out all the other components, which shouldn't have been a big deal, right? Wrong. Of course, everything that was plugged into the PCI Express slots came out with ease, but the motherboard, if this motherboard hadn't angered me enough over the past few months, it definitely didn't want to come out of this case without taking one final jab at me. So the right angle ATX power connector that the EVGA Dark comes equipped with looks to be convenient and maybe slightly more visually appealing when it comes to cable management. But man, what a fucking nightmare. I could not, for the life of me, pull the power connector off of this motherboard. I just couldn't wrap my fingers around the connector itself to pull it off because the right-angled position of it put it right up against the case. Oh, silly MiRai, just put your fingers around the edges of it and wiggle it out. Yeah, I was wiggling, I was jiggling, and I was swearing up a storm. It was ridiculous how difficult it was getting this thing out of there. I finally got it off after about 30 minutes of using a small flathead screwdriver to ever so slightly push each side of the connector a minuscule amount until it was finally able to pull it out with my fingers. That sucker was in there tight. I mean, you can't really penalize EVGA for this one because other boards have this as well. But if they would just put a regular ATX power connector on that board, it would have been so much easier and my vocal cords would have been in so much better condition for the remainder of that night. Anyway, after the board was out, I had to finish removing the RAM, the CPU cooler, and the CPU itself so that I could swap that stuff over to the new board. And when all of that was done, I took the EVGA Dark out back and I threw it on the ground. You must think I'm a joke. I ain't gonna be part of your system. Man, pump that garbage in another man's veins. I'm just kidding. I didn't throw it on the ground. I didn't break the motherboard.
It was the most difficult motherboard to get out of its box. I was afraid I was going to break this thing. Well, this is incredibly fancy. I am a sucker for aesthetics, so this thing is beautiful. This thing is incredibly heavy. That heatsink for the chipset is double-sided. I guess you could consider it. Helps hold it on. The VRM heatsinks on top are, for the most part, double-sided as well. I'm trying to watch the camera as I explain this. Up top here you can see another plate on the back. God, this thing is very heavy, so I'm going to set this down now before I drop it. Alright, it's time for round 2 of the Gelid GC Extreme. I just read some other reviews on Newegg, where I got the first tube from, and people were having the same issue with it being thick. So maybe Newegg got a bad batch. This one is actually from Amazon, so let's see what happens. Alright, so this one seems to be doing the same thing, but I might try to run with it with a different direction. But I'm going to zoom in here, if I can control the camera, so you guys can see what exactly I'm talking about. Now, if you've ever spread just regular thermal paste, my hands are gigantic. It should just spread. But if you watch this stuff, that was a good spread, right? Of course, now it's kind of working. No, see, there we go. It's not. I'm pushing much harder than I should ever have to push on this stuff. But I'm going to try to just coat as much as I can, because this stuff is supposed to be good. See, like right there, there's a perfect example. I'm spreading, but right here I've picked up everything off of there going in this direction. Unbelievable, man. I don't understand. I don't understand. I've never dealt with any paste like this before. And I really wanted the best. This is supposed to be the best.
So I ended up sticking with the gelid paste and trying to use the dot blob method, whatever you want to call it, the method where you just drop a blob of paste on the CPU itself and then let the cooler spread it out with its weight and pressure from the clamps when you attach it to the motherboard. Spoiler alert, it didn't work out so well, but more on that later. Now it was time to put the new board into the case, and everything worked out just fine. Not that I was expecting it not to, but all of my cabling was pretty much perfect length from where it was on the EVGA Dark. Next, the RAM, and remember that you should only ever start with a partial set of RAM, usually no more than having only a single channel populated to begin with. If you ever run into issues where you do need to really test components, then you should usually drop it down to only a single stick of RAM. And finally, the GPU. So sexy. Again, only one GPU to start off with to make sure that things work. This is referred to as a bare bones setup, where you populate the board with the minimal amount of components necessary to actually boot it up, so that if something doesn't work right off the bat, you aren't playing hardware roulette trying to guess which component could be bad or not seated properly. So everything booted up just fine, which meant I could continue installing the rest of the RAM. I didn't actually install the rest of the GPUs until the next day because I didn't have the right tool to put the backplates onto the GPUs. Yeah, I was totally thrown off when I saw that NVIDIA had moved from Phillips screws in their GPUs to super mini T8 or T6 Torx screws. Fortunately enough, EVGA was nice enough to include a set of Phillips screws with each backplate because I guess they know how shitty it is dealing with those little Torx screws. The hardware store was already closed for the night, so I figured I would just leave the GPUs out for now until I could put the backplates on them. So the next day finally came, and I was able to get a Torx set that included every micro, mini-size bit that I could ever possibly need, so I should be all set for any future backplate encounters. Here's maybe a tip for all the folks who do put backplates on their cards or want to put backplates on their cards. Have a system that allows you to track which GPU belongs to which serial number. Now, this doesn't really apply if you only have one GPU because you can't possibly mix that up. But the way NVIDIA cards work, or at least EVGA cards, is that they come with a sticker on the back of them that has the part number and the serial number of the card. The problem is introduced when you put the backplate on because it covers that sticker. You might be thinking, well, that's a good thing because the backplate helps keep the sticker on the card because it voids your warranty if that sticker falls off or you lose it. And you're right. But if you ever want to identify any of the GPUs by their serial numbers ever again, you now have to pull them all out and remove those backplates to look at their stickers. So what I did this time around is I used a Sharpie and put a small unique pattern of dots on each backplate and then the same pattern of dots on the box itself because there's a second identification sticker that's stuck to the retail box. This would rarely ever be an issue, but I recently ran into it when I was trying to figure out which of my old GPUs I wanted to keep. Luckily enough, I was able to partially see the serial numbers through two of the backplates. So through the process of elimination, I was able to figure out which ones I wanted to keep and which ones I wanted to sell without having to pull off the backplates. And a nice close-up shot of the GPU with the backplate installed. Like I said before, they're really just to help protect the backside of the card because these things are going to be sandwiched into this case in SLI, so they're all going to be running extra warm as it is. A close-up shot of it all up and running. And finally, some preliminary closing thoughts from myself.
All right, I think everything is together. Well, I don't think. I know it's together, but I think it's all going to work. So everything seems to be working. I did have to change out the thermal paste underneath there. I didn't have to pull the board out. I didn't want to pull the board out. So I just had to struggle with not being able to see what I was doing while trying to screw in some of the hardware that goes underneath this cooler. Unbelievable. I would show you footage from that, but it was really, there's a lot of swearing in that, a lot of vulgarity. So I'm not going to go ahead and show that. Unfortunately, this motherboard doesn't like my memory. It doesn't like my memory. It won't post my memory. Well, it'll post it at 1866, but it won't boot into Windows. And I cranked up the voltage a little bit, and it still doesn't want to take. So right now we're at 1600. Not really a big deal, probably. Not really a big deal. Nothing to worry about. Everything's cool. It all lights up. I got the EVGA. I don't think you guys can really see any of this lighting up going on. I'll post some screenshots or something at the end of this. It's daytime outside. You can't see what's going on here. One other cool thing that Asus does with this, they give you a case badge. You're like, oh, whole case badge, big deal. I know once you hit a certain age, you realize that stickers don't make things go faster. But no, it's a magnet. It's very cool. It's a heavy-duty magnet too. It wants to stick to metal. Unfortunately, because my case has an aluminum frame, it doesn't stick to my case, which kind of sucks, but oh well. And final thing here, actually I don't, let me unhook this, I'll show you guys this in a minute. So we've got this overclock panel, is what they call it, and it has different functions, but for the most part it plugs in. Some people were complaining about how long the cable is, and I can see why they complain about it. It plugs into the motherboard. Of course you're not going to have good light here. It plugs into the motherboard right down here, and the cable is only barely long enough to reach on top of my case. I did cut out, you can see that there, I chopped off a little cross section there of this vented area, and I was able to let the connector through. It's very cool. So this can sit on top now. It doesn't really give me, information that's extremely vital. It just tells you CPU, temperature, fan RPM, the ratio at which my CPU is running, and my base clock. There's a few other buttons on here. You can change some of the settings around to get what you like, but that's kind of cool. I paid enough for the goddamn motherboard. They should give me something like that. So here's maybe a close-up of everything. Some cable management, man. It's tight back there on the back side of the panel, on the back side of the case. It's very, very tight, and I don't want to mess with any of those cables ever again. You can see the clearance of the RAM. The RAM clearance is actually better than the other board. Probably just by millimeters, but it seems better. And that's pretty much it. Hopefully I can have some fun with this build. I'd say it's complete at this point. And yeah, thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you on the forum. I'll see you on YouTube. Take it easy.
And now for some final thoughts, now that I've had time to actually play with the entire setup. I will start off by saying that this is the most beautiful board I've ever used. I'm not necessarily speaking aesthetics here, but the BIOS and stability of the board itself are just, they're top notch. I think Asus really outdid themselves with this board, and it's unfortunate that the X79 chipset was such a letdown in the enthusiast department, which is who it was supposedly aimed at. Now, my only real gripe about this board is that the AS Media serial ATA controller was, for some reason, causing my system to hang when booting into Windows. I mean, my Windows boot times were like 20 to 30 seconds at best, when they should have easily been less than 10 seconds. I really dislike third-party serial ATA controllers anyway, so I just disabled it in the BIOS, and my speedy boot times have returned. Fortunately enough, I didn't need to use those extra ports for anything. I was able to bring my chip up to 4.5 gigahertz fairly easily with this board using less than 1.4 volts, something I was unable to do with the EVGA Dark. But because I'm on air, the temps were, of course, way out of control, and I'd rather not burn up my chip, so I decided to back it down to a reasonable speed. It's times like these where I kind of wish I had a custom water loop. As for the GPUs, they are incredibly easy to overclock, if that's your thing. It's not really my thing, but it was so easy to do that I just did it anyway. I mean, no voltage increase, just some free performance that I could get by moving some sliders around. Anyway, I've rambled on for long enough, but I just thought I'd toss that extra info out there. As always, thank you for watching. MiRai out.